This past weekend, you may have noticed that a group of us kind of left church almost soon as potluck was over, and we had gone to Civic Center Park, downtown Denver. There was an event called Awakening Colorado. It was a evangelic outreach to the folks who call Civic Center Park home. A lot of homeless folks down there, as well as folks that just kind of are down around the capital area there. Awakening Colorado is its own kind of organization. They had a number of ministries that they had invited to go, and they asked if Step 7 would come out, perhaps put a booth together, maybe help out a little bit wherever we could. And so I took a group up there, and Tom had a couple of folks with him, and we just decided to show up and see what God can do with us. And I'm gonna ask Brian if he'll start off with a little memory, something that kind of came to him about what God did.
In case you guys didn't know this, you cannot put God in a box. He comes in every color, shape, size, creed. God is for everyone. That's it.
From the experience this weekend, I've never experienced anything like that. I guess I would say I've been kind of protecting my whole life, but it was, first night I was really quiet, didn't say much. And, well, what I took away from it was being thankful that, I mean, you hear PT say it a lot. You need to be thankful heart.
Louder.
And it put it into a whole new perspective for me.
I went up the second night, and it's funny because Travis kept telling me, you gotta go, you're not gonna believe it. I said, well, tell me about it. I'm not gonna tell you anything. And, you know, we served a lot of people food, we talked to a lot of people, we prayed with a lot of people. But the one thing that touches me, before we left, we walked up to the Capitol. And there was a guy laying asleep against the wall, all alone. And, you know, Brian had been talking about, you know, what decision does it take for a person to get to where they're at? And, you know, I thought, oh, what's this guy going through? What's happening in his life? Which brought me to mine. And boy, it made my problems look small. And it made me so grateful for what God's done for me in the last couple of years. And I just came away with so much gratitude, you know, and it made me want to give all that much more. I'm really grateful for that. Thank you for asking me.
To me? Okay. For me, it was very cool because, like Brian was saying, it was a very mixed group of people, but the Holy Spirit was definitely there. You could feel it. And it brought to me that each one of us, in our own ways, is dealing with, you know, pretty epic things going on in our lives. But no matter how bad we are or how bad off we think we are, there's always room in us to serve those that are less fortunate than us, because there's always somebody that's going to be less fortunate than you. And it was just a great experience. The coolest part for me was when we had the whole crew down there. Step 7 was everywhere. I mean, we were setting up tents, we were serving food. It was just a great experience, and everybody would migrate towards the tent to get stuff because, well, part of it is because we were the only ones with cold bottled water. But outside of that, we like to think that they were there because they wanted us to pray for them. And we all got a chance to pray for some really cool people, and it was just interact with people and get our name and our mission out there and feel completely respected and acknowledged for what we do, and that's sharing Jesus with the addicted, because everybody that was there was, you know, there for the same purpose. Not necessarily sharing Jesus with the addicted, but glorifying God. And that was probably the coolest thing for me.
Okay, well, I have a whole different take on the situation that went in. Most of you don't know a lot about me, but a few short months ago, I was living in Civic Center Park. I was that homeless guy. At that point in my life, I had felt so much shame, so much hurt. I didn't want to lift my head up and look around and see what was going on around me. So when I got the opportunity to go with the guys, at first I was very hesitant. You know, I really didn't want that flashback of my life. But the first night, Tom prayed a prayer when we got there, and he said, you know, Lord, we're here. Use us.
Amen.
And that was it. We ended up serving Chinese food for several hours. And it was one of the most rewarding experiences for me because some of these guys, they hadn't eaten in days. So to be able to hand them a plate of food, sneak them back through the lines so they could have a second plate, you know, it really, really, really touched my heart. But later on in the evening, I had an experience that really just solidified to me, you know, how powerful our God is, and how great and loving and wonderful He is. We met a gentleman who had just had his backpack stolen. Everything he owned, his IDs, his medication, everything's gone. Sure, he smelled like alcohol. He was having a hard time functioning, but he wasn't a bad person. When I finally was brought into the tent to speak with him, he had been surrounded by several different preachers, and they were kind of berating him for his lifestyle. Not sure why I was called to do it, but I basically stepped into the tent and pulled him away and said, you and I are going to go for a walk. We walked out and walked him towards a quieter area in the park where we could actually talk. And I asked him to sit down on a bench with me. And I said, you know what? I said, why don't we just take a minute and let me pray? We'll see what we can do about finding your bag. Sat down, I said a prayer. I said, God, I know you're a loving God, you're a caring God. You want the best for all of us. I said, would you please help us find this gentleman's belongings? When I finished praying, we looked up, and here comes a gentleman with his backpack. I mean, if we don't have a God that loves showing off, loves the power that He has, I mean, it was amazing. I mean, it was just one of those moments. I brought him back around to the tent where everybody was sitting, and everybody just kind of looked at me like, what? You found his bag in the dark, in the middle of this park with all these people? I'm like, yeah, we found it. To better that story, the next morning or next afternoon, Brian and Travis were wandering around the park, and they come across the same young man who was sitting there reading the Bible. So not only did that little thing, because the last thing I left him with when I took him back to the tent is, you know, humans were fallible. We'll fail you. We'll let you down. We're not perfect. But God will never fail you. And that was enough. So for me, that was the biggest thing was, you know what? Yeah, I may have come from that circumstance, but God has called me to use my experience in those moments, and we have to be ready to answer that call. We don't have to have the right thing to say. We don't have to know what to do. But we have to trust Him to say, yes, Lord, I'll do it. So.